Today, and I'd like to now bring well, not bring to the stage, because I'll bring to the digital stage Kay Thompson-Barker, who is of Sea Light Development Limited, who will be talking about influence and top tips around influence. Welcome, Kay. How are you today?
Hi, William. Yes, very well, thank you. Really pleased to be here virtually.
Still not used to it after how many months? I'm not. It's a shared feeling.
No, but very glad not to be traveling today, actually. So lots of benefits still to this virtual world. Okay, so hello everybody. As I said, I'm absolutely delighted to be here this afternoon to share a few little insights from my experience into influencing. But let me just give a little bit of background about myself first of all. So I started my career in retail, in call centre retail, in a huge company called Gus Home Shopping. Some of you may have heard of them. In the olden days, they used to sell all sorts of clothing and household items through catalogues. And I was involved with them working through their call centres and got involved in training from a very early start in my career. Then moved on to banking. I worked at Santander. Again, still continuing to work in people and development. And then around about 14 years ago, I moved to the Science Museum Group, who many of you will have heard of. And I originally joined as People and Organisation Development Manager, and then progressed on to focus on strategic resourcing, and then finally was head of people with responsibility for HR and volunteering across the group. My professional expertise is an absolute passion is in people development. I have spent many years developing leaders and managers, and it's from that basis that I hope I can share some insight with you today. And especially this group is very important to me, coming from the Science Museum Group, of course, historically, but the value of volunteering to me is very strong, not least because I'm passionate about helping individuals and organisations fulfil their potential, but more broadly in terms of communities and countries at large gaining the social and economic impact and value through volunteering. A lot of my work now as a consultant is helping organisations to increase diversity and become far more inclusive in their leadership. And of course, volunteering is absolutely a brilliant way to increase diversity, to help organisations become far more representative and to benefit from much different perspectives to become more sustainable, improve their performance. So that brings us on to then why we need to wear shoes that don't fit. So this is going to be a short taster into a masterclass that I'm going to run for HVG in January. So give you a little taste into that. But let's just put some context around it. When we reflect back over this year, we've experienced some real significant shifts in political, economic, and social priorities. And the principles and the values that underpin our purpose have changed. Individuals, organisations, communities globally, we've re-evaluated what is important to us. And of course, now as we move into 2021, new ways of working and volunteering are really starting to take shape. But we know people are calling for principled, inclusive, and compassionate leadership. And so as leaders and as influencers, wearing shoes that don't fit can help us to really appreciate the different perspectives within that complex landscape. Now, of course, this is a metaphor. You don't physically have to put on shoes that don't fit. That could cause some quite serious damage to our feet. This is very much about dialing up our emotional intelligence, ensuring that the impact of our actions are positive for the individuals and organisations that face such continued change and uncertainty. So in the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to give you a taster into this masterclass we're going to run in January and share some of my experience and tips with you. So when we think about successful interviewing, influencing. What do we mean here? Perhaps it's about finding just the right appeal. Oops, I do apologize. Perhaps it's just about finding just the right appeal for a particular listener. Perhaps it's about building buy-in from a key people. Perhaps it's about growing a network of support for an initiative. Perhaps it's about being more persuasive and engaging when presenting to a group. Perhaps it's about being respected and having the ear of others, something we might call presence. So it'd really be great to hear from you in the chat. Think about let us know who you need to influence. Why do you need to influence them? What are you trying to influence people to do? So share from your perspective, please, in the chat. Some of these people, who are the key people you need to influence? Why do you need to influence them? What are you trying to influence people to do? Perhaps it's about giving money. Perhaps it's about committing resources. Perhaps it's about working differently. Perhaps it's about focusing on different priorities. But really interesting to hear from you in terms of what it is you're trying to do with your influencing. So we've got colleagues supervising and supporting volunteers effectively. Yes, of course. So much of your work will absolutely be about influencing your colleagues to work in a really inclusive, compassionate, enabling way to support volunteers effectively and to help volunteers fulfill their own potential. What I would really say about influence is it's about the impact that you make and what changes as a result. Or you might say it's about what impression you leave and what happens as a result of that impression. So it might be an agreement or a commitment, or it might be more fundamentally about a change in behaviour that's underpinned by a shift in values and beliefs. So Rhiannon's talking about influencing senior management to think about volunteering management well. Thanks Rhiannon. So when we look at this picture, what do you see? Now this is a picture that's been around for a very, very long time. It's been used in psychology experiments for many, many years. It's a perception test. Let us know in chat, what do you see first? When you first look at this picture, do you see a young woman or an old woman? And you can just type into chat young or old. It'd be really interesting to see. Which did you see first? A young woman or an old woman? Okay, brilliant, thank you. Lots of people seeing young woman. Anybody seeing the old woman just yet? Keep going, keep sharing. What can you see? Young, lots and lots of people seeing the young woman. Can anybody see the old woman in this picture? Doesn't look like it. So let me show you the old woman. So if we look at the old woman, here's the old woman's nose. Here's her chin down here. Here's her, either her hair or some kind of headscarf, and then a bonnet around the back. And we see there. Can you see that now? So this is an experiment that's been done, as I say, for many, many years. But it really is there to demonstrate the point that people see different things. We should look at the same picture and we see something differently. And it's the same with behavior. So let me just clear the mess that I've made there. So you think about behavior then. So if I believe I'm being honest, Will might say that I'm being direct. Rhiannon might say that I'm being rude. I might believe that I'm being decisive. Again, Will might say I'm being judgmental. Someone else, Rhiannon, for example, might say I'm bossy. One set of behavior, a range of interpretations, a huge potential for making the wrong impression. My intention has been perceived differently, or from my perspective, misinterpreted one behaviour, a range of interpretations. And that brings us on to the first key principle, I suppose, of influencing. It's not what you do or the way you do it, it's how other people interpret it that matters. So you think about times when another person's interpreted someone's behaviour differently to you. They might have been in a meeting, for example, might have been in an interview, for example. Someone else has interpreted and described the impact of that behaviour on them differently to the way you experienced it. For example, did you feel someone was decisive in a meeting? Did someone else think they were impulsive? Does one person leave that room feeling reassured and another person feel nervous as a result? Think about it in a family context. You know, was I assertive or demanding when asking for help with the washing up? And does one person feel supported in doing the washing up and does another feel unfairly done to? So if someone isn't convinced by your compelling business case or won over by your charm and intellect, it's likely there's a rational explanation for that. Our brains are wired to look at a situation through our own eyes and not through the other person's. And that brings us on to the second key principle of influencing. To influence others, we've got to put ourselves in the other person's position, to wear their shoes. They might not fit, they might not be our style, they might be really uncomfortable, but that's what's really needed to get to that position to be able to influence someone else. Understanding how others perceive things then is absolutely gold dust. The more we can find out and anticipate how someone will perceive our behaviour, then we can adapt to meet their needs, to help to get the impact that we want. Putting ourselves in the other person's shoes, seeing things from their perspective and adapting our behaviour will absolutely increase the likelihood of persuading and engaging other people, making the impact we want and getting the support and commitment that we need. So, a practical takeaway from today. People make decisions for their reasons, not yours. So when you are trying to influence someone, you want them to make a decision or a commitment or to change the way they behave at work, they will do that for their own reasons, not yours. And this set of scales model can just really help us to think about that in a really simplistic way. How will I benefit and how much will it cost me? These are the key factors that are influencing whether or not I agree to your proposal, whether I'll give you some money, whether I'll change the way that I support volunteers. And the scales need to be tipped in the right direction for me to make that decision, or at the very least, they need to be balanced. So what we do in the hours masterclass that we're going through in January is go into more detail in exploring our own influencing style and how others with different styles might perceive our own style. So how we've got this risk of potential for conflicting perceptions, people experiencing our behaviour or our influencing differently than the way we hope it would do. And then what we can do to adapt our own style to inspire people to listen to what we've got to say, buy into our ideas, support our proposals. And within that workshop, there's lots and lots of practical techniques that we can use to influence people with confidence and credibility. So if you can join us in January, we'd really, really welcome you with open arms. And I hope that you will find it very, very valuable. So I'm open to questions now, Will.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kay. Thank you for sharing a little taster of what we've got to come. I think it's on the 26th of January, isn't it, at the moment? Mm-hmm. And it's going to be a bit longer session, so it's going to fit in between our normal coffee afternoons. So do make sure to book some space for your time on the 26th of January if you're interested. We'll be sending out more information shortly on the event. Kay, with such a wide range of organisations in the cultural sector, from groups like, for example, Science Museum, where you've worked in the past, to where I work at a Cunliffe Museum, where there's only 3 staff members. Mm-hmm. How important is influencing on that smaller level, those smaller organisations, do you think there's a different way to influence with trustees, for
Mm.
example, as you would with a colleague?
Mm. I think the key difference between small and large organisations is that within a smaller organisation, it's usually easier to get to know people. You're more often going to be in contact with them, and therefore you get to experience how they work, how they like to work, how they communicate, listening to the types of language they use to pick up on some really useful cues for influencing, to observe how others influence them and what works and what doesn't work. And in a larger organisation, it's much more difficult to do that. Of course, perhaps there might be more than 1,000 people who you might want to influence to work differently with volunteers, for example. And it's difficult to get to know all of those people, of course. Whether it's large or small, it really pays dividends to spend some time where it's something that you're influencing that is really, really important, to spend some time planning how to influence your key stakeholders. So planning how you can get to know how they are likely to respond, planning how, going back to the scales, how it would benefit and what would it cost them. And there's lots of ways that we can do that, which we'll cover in the masterclass next week. But again, about observing, talking to others, putting ourselves into the person's shoes. In an ideal world with influencing, we would tailor our approach to every individual. We would approach every individual with a different approach. Of course, in the real world, that's just not possible. But perhaps we might develop 2 or 3 or even 4 different approaches that we can intertwine so that we're covering off the key bases with different styles of people. And that's what we'll cover again in the masterclass.
Thank you. And I get one more question I have is on whether you think the onset of Zoom in 2020 and video conferencing has changed the need to influence or the situations people have to influence in, because so many people often did like micro networking around the coffee pot or lunch break or something. Do you think that's changed how we influence or the need to influence?
I think it has, and it's unavoidable that it has, because much of what we do with influencing is around observing body language, non-verbal cues, and using our own body language and non-verbal cues to influence people. But it doesn't mean that we can't do a really great job in influencing online. It's taking that step back and reflecting upon how we can best do that, how we can make that connection. And actually, the power of influencing is all in the planning. I think really, as we develop good virtual working practices, then the virtual world can is creating a more level playing field. So, everybody has the same size box on the screen. There isn't as much room for the big egos that I'm sure we're all used to experiencing. Now, of course, someone can still try to shout loudest and talk over people in this virtual world, but if we can use some good meeting practice, for example, by enabling everybody to have their opportunity to contribute before someone's allowed to speak a second time, can really help to hear all the voices in the room. And that's a really good way of then listening into what will be the benefits for somebody, what will it cost somebody to buy into your idea to change your way of working. So I think with some good virtual working practice, we can really help to improve those opportunities to influence.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kay. Thank you for sharing an insight into influence today, and I hope we will see some of you here on 26th of January to find out a bit more about influence and how it applies to you, because it definitely applies across the entire spectrum of the sector, not just people in for example, decision-making positions. So a final part of today's talk is it's really a bit of an open question, really. Christmas is going to be very different this year for all of us. Obviously, going home is going to be very strange for all of us, and for our volunteers, it's going to be strange as well. So my question is, how are you celebrating Christmas, or how have you celebrated other festivals throughout the year? I think it's really a good chance to share ideas and talk about what we do. In the past, we did a physical murder mystery at a museum, which was fun. We all wore different hats. Some of us had to wear two hats because we were playing two different characters, and it was a lovely evening to bring a year to the end. But obviously this year is going to be very different. So if you've got any ideas, I've saw some in the chat already, so I would love to hear some more as well. So anyone got any tips, or have you already done your Christmas Zoom event, and how did it go?
Well, I actually wanted to ask something about this, about Christmas, and we're going to be hosting a small Zoom quiz and get together gathering. But I'm very much aware that a lot of my volunteers are still not wishing to use Zoom, or sort of like that, not the best thing for them. So collectively as a group, if people have got some other suggestions, it would be great to hear. Definitely, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great, yeah. Is anyone else planning any other events? Are they planning more into like just saying thank you in person as volunteers come in? Imagine it's a very strange time because some volunteers might not have come back yet either, which is it's going to be a strange situation for many volunteers. I can definitely resonate with that.
Emma's popped something in the chat. Do you want to speak up and say a little bit more about what you're planning?
Yeah, just trying to unmute myself. I work with Kirklees Museums and Galleries, so we had the outdoor volunteers back. That was lovely, but unfortunately that's been stopped. And I haven't seen my collections volunteers for what seems like an eternity. So we did suggest a Teams meeting, but they've all come back and said they want to do it via Zoom. And I already volunteer with guiding, so I've got a Zoom account I can use. So yeah, I've had plenty of practice doing crafts with my guides and stuff. So yeah, we've got them all, you know. So yeah, I'm just going to do that with the grown-ups. You know, it's just really nice for them to be making something. And while they're engaged in that, we found that the girls chatted. So I'm hoping it'll be the same with the grown-ups.
That sounds lovely, and particularly at Christmas, crafts and stuff. That sounds like a really good way to bring people together, and hopefully you'll get some conversations, just seeing how everyone's doing. I know we've got a live Christmas concert on Zoom coming up at Canada Museum, so I'm planning to tag on an event around that. So we'll meet up beforehand, and almost like going out for a Christmas meal, you go to a bar beforehand, and then go to a Christmas meal. We'll meet up on Zoom and then go to the other Zoom to listen to a Christmas recital, which has always been popular with our volunteers. So I think that sounds like a lovely plan in Kirklees.
Sonia, do you want to say a little bit more? I really like the Zoom element of this. I'd love to see some examples. Do you want to unmute yourself, Sonia?
Sorry, missed my name. I thought you said Sonia, I wasn't sure. Yeah, this is a new role. I've only been doing it for the last 10 months or so. So it was a kind of a panic thinking, how are we going to do this, because we haven't seen anyone for so long. I've just started coffee mornings every other Friday, and that's been really good. So a lot of people have got used to Zooms. A lot of them are, 70 plus. Got a lot of young ones as well, but actually the older ones are actually really nifty. I didn't need to do half the teaching that I thought we were going to have to. So a lot of them seem okay. So we're going to do on Wednesday the 16th, 1 o'clock, just a Christmas last get together. And I was trying to keep it simple, but actually for an hour and a half, we thought we'll do a quiz. So I've got all the staff in the museums and libraries to give in a couple of questions about what they would know probably. And a lot of staff are coming, library staff and museum staff as well, and just introducing each other for those who've never met each other, but also just the quiz and dress up and bring your wine or your mulled wine and see how we go. So it's quite simple, but I think the Zoom thing's been quite a nice exercise for a lot of people.
And I particularly like your best Zoom
background. So we've only had about 3 or 4 coffee mornings, and the first one was a very simple intro, how you literally get onto Zoom, and then the next one was how to use the chat so they could meet each other and share phone numbers and things like that. And now it's find that background. So each time it's been a bit of an exercise, and I think particularly the elderly ones really love it. You know, they like having a bit of an exercise or homework that they can practice with their grandkids.
Thank you so much, Sonia.
No, it's lovely. I know my volunteers, they always form their own groups, and I'm suddenly they're saying, oh, I saw so and so in town, and or on Zoom and stuff, and I'm going to catch up with them on what they've been up to rather than what the museum's been doing. And I saw a lovely post by Lainey. I don't know, Lainey, if you wanted to talk about what you were doing, what were you doing with your volunteers? Maybe. Wow, if you have seen in the chat, you can see that their volunteers with their Christmas card are getting a voucher for coffee and cake, which I think is a really nice way to recognise their work and show your continued support for them. But I know there's a couple other ones in the chat as well. If you go through, there's loads going on. I'm loving seeing all the different things people are getting planning. So I've got loads of ideas now. So I'm saving this chat so I can take some of the ideas.
Yeah,
cool.
Absolutely. So does anyone else want to sort of mention anything else that they're doing? I'm doing a very boring quiz, so you know everyone's doing one of those. But any new ideas here? I really like the cracker making. I'd love to be a fly on the wheel to understand how you're going to do that. But whoa.
I've got quite a nice idea. It's that I've done before. It's like a sort of scavenger hunt, so it's not all about sort of like general knowledge or even like a festive sort of theme. But you know, you can ask people to like find different things around the house, and then they get different amount of points for who brings it back first. You know, and that's been quite a good thing I've just done personally in a quiz. But it's quite a nice way of just changing it up.
That sounds fun. I love a bit of a sort of quiz with a different sort of thing rather than being about facts and stuff. We did one of our volunteer quizzes during summer was higher or lower, but it was about guessing whether a city was higher or lower on the Earth's latitude than the other one. So it turns out no one knows where America is in terms of height because everyone thinks it's the same level as us, but it's much further south. So that was fun, and probably one of the hardest quizzes we actually did was guessing.
We could do a version of that, Will, going around the different organisations, seeing who's got more volunteers than the other ones.
I like this one in here, though. It's a who's who from Emma, where you all put loads of kind of paraphernalia on hats and scarves, and you have to guess who they are. I totally think that we should have done that today.
We should have. And of course, there's always like Zoom chat games where you say the first thing comes to your head and that sort of thing, which we said we're going to do for this one and then completely forgot about doing it. But I think we are going to have to call today's session to a close. Thank you for everyone who shared their ideas for Christmas with their volunteers. I hope you all have a safe Christmas, and you and your volunteers celebrate Christmas together in at least a digital form or in any way you can. So thank you for joining us this week. We'll be back on the 12th of January with our next coffee afternoon. And then as we said earlier, we'll be joining Kay for a special session on the 26th of January talking about influence. Get both in your diaries. Back here, 3 o'clock on the 12th of January. We look forward to seeing you then. Have a good Christmas and Happy New Year.